All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this radcast of the Solution Club at the beginning of the new world. Happy to be joined by you all. We're also live streaming on Twitch, and the URL for that is twitch.tv/Radish Live. And so we will be here for a full 8 hours today. The last 2 hours of today's meeting will be the Vegan World 2026 Collective Intelligence meeting, led by Dr. Silas Rao and colleagues, myself included. So that's at the very last 2 hours of this 8-hour meeting. For the first 6 hours, we're now almost half an hour in. We're going to cover a couple topics for starters that we've been talking about, and then we'll get into the topics of the agenda that I sent out last night. So the first two topics, the first one is Charles Eisenstein versus Guy McPherson. So I posted a video to YouTube over the weekend based on the portion that we had on the block party that we recorded. And let me start off with, as Emery requested, just kind of a brief synopsis of Charles Eisenstein and kind of what his whole shtick is. The way I would sum it up is as follows. He wrote some really awesome books early on, or several years ago, and then he wrote a fourth book, which was published, I think, early last year, called Climate: A New Story. And his first three books I really like. One of them is called Sacred Economics. Another is The Ascent of Humanity. And his third book was called That More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. Great books, all three of them. And then with Climate: A New Story, it feels to me personally like he kind of lost the thread, and has done kind of an analysis of different people's stories and takes on climate change. And, I read maybe a third of the book and then, was like, where the heck is this going? And because it doesn't seem to actually get us anywhere in terms of, all right, here's my proposal. It's like, what's the proposal, right? So it almost seems like very clever rhetoric in a way. Yeah, there's some interesting facts there and interesting analysis, but in the end, there's no there, and we need a story that's empowering, and that will move us forward and out of the immense danger, omnicidal danger that we're in right now. And so that's the basis of my criticism of Charles Eisenstein. And in his book, he's quite dismissive, and frankly, even insulting of Guy McPherson and his work. And so that was the basis for our conversation early Saturday morning on the last block party. So anyway, I posted the link in the chat here if folks would like to see that. So, my take on Charles Eisenstein is he's not at all about the collective. I actually, when I met him in 2015, I invited him to participate with me in collective intelligence, developing a planetary collective intelligence to deal with this. And he wasn't interested. He was pretty dismissive. So that wasn't very impressive for me either. So my impression of him is, he's got his gig going on of writing books and giving lectures and, sounding impressive and therefore selling more books and getting invited to more give more lectures and whatnot. And, but in the end, especially with this most recent book, Climate: A New Story, it's like, there's no there. What's, and I say that coming from the perspective that we're coming from here on the Solution Club and the Block Party, which is we urgently need solutions. We need to get there. If there is a there, we need to find it. We happen to think that we're pretty well on, that we've got a good trajectory for that here. And, based on collective intelligence and all of us coming together and co-creating a new path forward, co-creating all of the solutions, strategies, story, even collective superintelligence itself, whatever is required. And the starting point for it, as we'll get into a bit later, for us is the conversation. Let's all have a conversation. For me, that's kind of the obvious point that we've gotten to, is that humanity needs to come together in conversation. I don't see Charles doing that or participating in that or supporting that. I see him kind of in the old model of, I'm the wise academic guru, scholar, writer, whatever. So, buy my books, listen to my lectures, and, that's all there is to do. Right. So anyway, that's why I'm very disappointed in Charles, in his writing, in his lack of leadership, in his lack of embracing collective intelligence as, a meta solution for generating all the solutions that we need. Go for it, Emery. Yes.
Yeah. So, question: Does Charles see the issue non-reversible as Guy McPherson does? Because Guy McPherson, he always introduces the situation as irreversible, abrupt climate change. It's irreversible in his mind at the moment, unless the collective intelligence is able to convince him otherwise. Now, is Charles looking at it the same way, in your opinion, or does he see some kind of ice age coming in to put us, in line for a little bit of a break?
Yeah. He certainly doesn't seem to be as alarmed as Guy McPherson. He writes about extinction, so he knows that the extinction is going on, and everybody knows that extinction is irreversible. But he does not seem to be taking the same sense of urgency as Guy McPherson. Almost like we've got whatever until 2050, 2100. So plenty of time for you all to read my books and listen to my lectures, and but again, there's no there, right? So you've got your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, he seems to be saying that like people like us were on the side of the alarmists. Oh, it's really serious. Things have come to such a pass. That it's near-term extinction, or we're with the denialists, and he calls the denialists the skeptics, arguing that okay, scientists have done a lot of bad things, they've got a lot of things wrong, so this out and out belief of science is stupid too. And then his path that he takes, he argues that he's going some middle ground between those two paths. We're in the wrong as either skeptics, denialists, or in the wrong as catastrophists, and we're setting ourselves up in this kind of warring situation, whereas he's taking a much, the higher road. He's going in between, and he says we have to look at rivers as sacred, and the earth as sacred, in order to get anywhere, but in order to convince people. But I don't see anyone being convinced much either by the science or by the sacred, so it really doesn't stand up. That's no more convincing to say this river's sacred, so don't pollute it. That's not stopping some industry from polluting that river, is it? So no, it just seemed, I'm not very religious anyway, so I've already got my prejudices against that kind of stuff, but he seems to be going nowhere. And I think Jamin summed it up, that there was no there. and I made an effort to listen to quite a few of his talks, because I felt unhappy that I just sort of dissed him as a snake oil salesman in public.
Well, I mean, given the gravity of our situation, anyone who puts themselves out in public as a leader, seeking to make real change happen, and getting significant audience, there's noblesse oblige there, and I think they're perfectly fair game to be critiqued, challenged. I would love to debate Charles Eisenstein on these topics, so I'll put that out publicly anytime, or even organize a roundtable.
Also, also, Jamer, he talks about treating everything in nature as sacred, and I did check it out. He's not a vegan; he is a meat eater. So somehow the creatures, he doesn't quite get that creatures might be sacred too, that non-human animals might be sacred too. So it didn't stack up really at all.
Right. That's funny. I thought he was vegan. But you found I mean, did he talk about that? Or
I did an extensive search to find out whether he ate meat or not. He eats meat. How up to date that information is, I don't know. But in some of the talks, he did sort of slightly refer to animals as, being part of nature too, but not in a way that sounded very worked out. It was passed over really quickly, like an embarrassing or an embarrassed aside, because he hadn't taken that as part of his spiel that he was giving. But I had to do quite an extensive search on it to find out. And as far as I know from what came up, he does eat meat.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right. Any more questions or comments about Charles Eisenstein versus Guy McPherson, etc.?
So, just finally, what is the ultimate difference between him and Guy? What is the breaking point of what's the precise conflict?
Right. Okay. So for me, the breaking point is that Guy McPherson acknowledges and is very explicit about all of the threats and urgency of exponential abrupt climate change, the 67 self-reinforcing feedback loops, et cetera, et cetera. Charles does not take that stance, does not share that stance. In fact, it's quite unclear what stance he does take. But he's more just like writing really interesting, seemingly interesting prose about all this and different aspects of it. So, as far as I'm concerned, Guy is out there to sound the alarms, and Charles is out there to make money, look good, and get invited to give talks so he can keep his own little franchise going. I think he's mostly self-serving, is my impression, and not really out to solve anything. But that's just my impression. Again, I'd love to debate the guy. Here, I got to talk to the crows. Hey, Dickwang. Cut. Dickwang. Hey, Dickwang. Cut. That's my love word to the crows. I give them the love call that they make. Anyway, here, let me just. Hey, sweetheart. The crows are out. Okay, thanks.
So slip Beckworth in there for a minute.
Yeah. I beg pardon, Emery?
Slip Beckwith in there for a minute.
Okay, Charles Beckwith. Yeah. Or is it, what's his first name? is it Peter? David? I forget. Anyway, but Beckwith, the Canadian, right? The Canadian climate scientist.
Yeah, his name's Paul Beckwith.
Paul Beckwith. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, stick them in there.
All righty. So,
I mean, there's a number of them. There's a number of them we could put in there. But, for the time being, just for comparison's sake.
yeah. But anyway, actually, I think a more interesting thing to look at right now is actually Codes for a Healthy Earth. So I'd like to play that 5-minute video if people are game, and then we can talk about that. Because, you know, with Charles, you know, there's just no there. What's the point in talking about Charles Eisenstein? You know, it's more of I think that's more a reflection of kind of society itself, where society is at, that they're gravitating more towards listening to these, you know, pseudo gurus, right? Melissa calls it elitism.
I was talking about it since you brought it up, so you know, I wasn't really looking at him specifically anyway, but since you brought him into the picture, I felt, okay, let's find out the down and low about him. But I didn't feel he was particularly contributing very much anyway.
All right, very good. So it seems we've got consensus to maybe move on from the Charles Eisenstein topic. Of course, we can always come back to it if anyone would like to. Just say the word. Meanwhile, shall I share the Codes for a Healthy Earth video? Let me share that one. It is 4.5 minutes long. So I'm going to screen share and share that one now, unless there's any objections. All right, sharing now. I'm going to mute my microphone when I do this, so you won't hear from me for 4.5 minutes.
We can't save the world by playing by the rules, because the rules have to be changed.
We cannot be radical enough in dealing with the issues.
We are in the 6th mass extinction, and both the species extinction of the same coin.
Actually, everything we have to do is change the system. We have to overthrow this system, which is eating the planet with perpetual growth.
Citizens of the world have woken to the reality that the escalating global crises will not be resolved from within the same systems that created them, and that the solutions we need to effectively solve most of the crises already exist. Radical system change means fundamentally transforming how we organize ourselves as a species to ensure rapid social and ecological regeneration. It means transforming all our outdated and dysfunctional social systems simultaneously and globally. Governance, economics, law, media, education, agriculture. The whole system, everything. The big question is, how? How do we do it? Codes for a Healthy Earth affirms that the only legitimate purpose of governance is to protect and cultivate the health and vitality of the planet and all its inhabitants for generations to come. Codes for a Healthy Earth offers a foundational framework for individuals and groups to work together as one humanity across national, cultural, and ideological boundaries for immediate and resilient global action. The codes are rooted in the understanding that our personal, collective, and planetary health are all interconnected and interdependent. And that for humanity to thrive, the entire planetary ecosystem must thrive. Codes for a Healthy Earth include a collective commitment to rewilding and restoring the health and diversity of our biosphere, and to ensuring that all humans and animals have guaranteed access to pure water, clean air, healthy soil, vitalizing food, comfortable shelter, physical and emotional safety, and the cultural and ecological conditions and resources needed for all to realize their unique life-enhancing potential. Using the codes as a shared compass, citizens, grassroots leaders, collectives, and movements are uniting to co-create a healthy new global reality. Join the global community where you can learn more about the whole system strategy and unite for action at codes.earth. Together, we rise for all of life.
All righty. So that was played at the beginning of a 2-hour meeting today that I caught most of from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific time. And that's from Humanity Rising, which is having meetings 2 hours every day during that same time window from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. They say until the end of the crisis. And so this was the first Humanity Rising meeting I went to. We had discussed it on the block party with Nolan, who attended the opening ceremonies and whatnot. And, you know, with the codes, well, first I'm going to pause, see if anyone has any questions or comments about what we just saw, because I've got some comments which I'd like to share, and I'd like to screen share to give a little framing for it. And this gets to the other agenda items that I wrote about the obvious and the non-obvious. But anyway, I'll get to that. But first I'm going to go on mute and welcome you all to comment. All right, I'm going to get some stuff ready to share, but just jump in. There's only half a dozen of us right now, so it's a perfect number for just open sharing. We don't have to worry about a queue or anything like that. So just jump in. And I'm going to share some stuff in a second here.
Okay. The Zoom meeting you were at?
Pardon me, Emery?
That was a Zoom meeting you were at?
Yeah, it was on Zoom. It's called Humanity Rising. And it doesn't cost anything to participate. You can donate if you want. But
where are they advertising?
You know, so it's put on by Ubiquity University. Let me see if I can get a link and I can put it in there. Okay. Okay, here's a link. Let me get this in there. Humanity Rising. So they meet every day for 2 hours. And by the way, Charles Eisenstein's going to be one of the speakers. He's kind of one of the ones who, and it's humanityrising.solutions is the URL. I'll put that up there as well. Okay. Let me, yeah, sorry, Emery, go ahead.
There's no doubt that humanity is rising. You know, that seems to be pretty obvious these days, that everybody's trying to rise to the challenge, right? But it's whether we can all meet to voice together as a unified, you know, collective to accomplish things in real time and get things done. You know, that's the bigger. I think that's the bigger road ahead of us. You know, with together with the conversation that we so eloquently put forward. You know, come and be part of the conversation. You know, yeah, let us all who are rising, you know, find our way to that Zoom meeting somewhere, okay, that's going to unify us all to corrective actions. Let's do it. Yeah.
Totally. I'm 100% with you, Emery. And that's really my whole point and bottom line. But I want to develop it a little further. So let me screen share for a quick second. I just want to show one slide. And because I think that the codes for a healthy Earth and really fit within this framework. So let me just screen share real quick. Okay. So you all see the whole world slide, I presume. And this, you know, we all want a whole world. We all want a world that supports life and compassion and love and healing and regeneration and all that. And, you know, Codes for a Healthy Earth has exactly that same objective. In this slide, I break it down into people and planet and say, you know, yes, we need to take care of human needs like feeding everyone. And we need to do so in a way that's healthy for the planet, and we need to do a bunch of healing work. SRM is at the top of the list, solar radiation management to cool the planet. And this little pyramid of 3 topics, whole world, people, and planet, I call kind of the obvious, right? Obvious in the sense that, you know, basically for the last 55 years, we've been in an intense conversation about the world we want and what people need and what the planet needs. So this is now within the realm of the obvious. What's not obvious is exactly what you said, Emery. How do we get there, right? And that's what I'll talk about next. But so you raised your hand. Go for it, So.
Yeah, you wanted some feedback on it, and initially I didn't have any, but frankly, it looked like another corporate thing you get. You know, it could be a pamphlet, it could be a glossy thing you get through the post. You know, there was nothing on it. You know, okay, there was a lion at the end. Yeah, we care about the lion. The lion looked upset. There was Jane Goodall cuddling her chimp. You know, but nothing grabbed me. Yeah, the thing that grabbed me, if anything, was how, the word how. But the rest of it, it was polished in such the most boring corporate kind of, you know, save the planet way. You know, Greenpeace have been doing much better than that for donkey's years. You know, as an advertising presentation, it was, I'll give it about one out of 10.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, So. And so, and per the slide I just shared, for me, this is all within the realm of what is now just obvious. It's obvious we need to cool the planet. It's obvious we need to take care of people. It's obvious we need to, you know, flatten the inequality gap. It's obvious that we need radical transformations in governance, economics, currency, culture, our entire set of living arrangements, the whole shebang, right? So that's now obvious. So I call that the obvious pyramid, whole world at the top and then people and planet underneath. We all know what we need, but it's like, you know, how do we get there? Like you said, so the most impressive part of that whole video, I agree, that's the only part that grabbed me, was like, how? Yeah, that's right. It's like, yeah, you know, that's it, because that's exactly the point we're making. We all know we want a healthy, regenerative, healing world without mass extinction, genocide, etc. You know, the question is how? How do we get there? And for me, that takes us into the realm of the non-obvious, right? So we got that obvious pyramid, and here I'm going to screen share again because I want to show the next slide that proceeds after that. Okay, so we start with whole world. This is just basically, what is the future we want? What is the world we want? And what's it going to take to get there? So we can imagine coming up with a list of what do we need to do for people? What do we need to do for the planet? And this is really the, you know, just a conceptual view. I'm not trying to be complete here, but just giving some examples, some important ones, of course, of, you know, for wholeness for people, what do we need? Well, we have physical needs, right? And we also have higher needs. And so complete wholeness for people involves all of these, including a purpose, right? And a story, right? We're now entering this new story that it's not just about us, it's about the whole world. And so this right-hand side is a big part of that, which is wholeness for the planet. And then we can go deeper and deeper. But when I call this the realm of the obvious, what I'm saying here is this is all actually quite well understood. We know what people need to be well. We know what the planet needs to be well. A healthy temperature range, a lack of pollutants, lack of chainsaws, etc. And so, you know, how do we balance these two? How do we take care of people while at the same time healing the planet? You know, and that's the big how that simply has not been addressed yet. And that's what I put in the realm of the non-obvious. So that what I just shared is what I call the obvious pyramid, you know, the obvious whole world pyramid. The non-obvious, just imagine right next to it, there's a whole other like pyramid called the non-obvious. And the very first point I want to, that also has 3 pillars as I've laid it out. Of course, we can come up with other frameworks, but the one that I've put together in the non-obvious, the first pillar I want to talk about is strategy, right? So again, back to the obvious, we, you know, it's obvious we want a whole world. It's obvious what the needs of people and planet are. Great. What's our strategy to get there? Right? And to give an example of a strategy, I point to Operation Stone Soup. There's a strategy within Operation Stone Soup. That strategy is not the whole of Operation Stone Soup, but it's, you know, an important heart of it. And the strategy basically says we're going to feed everyone, starting in one city. We'll do a huge press conference, invite the world to participate. In that process, we build out collective superintelligence. And we can then apply that to ending hunger. So the end of hunger and the evolution of collective superintelligence, those would be a co-evolution. The end of hunger and CSI would co-evolve in that process. They're co-evolving, both going up, 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 up. And once CSI reaches a certain critical mass, then we can apply it to other things like solar radiation management. Let me revise that statement. What I said was, once CSI reaches a certain critical mass, we can apply it to SRM. Let me take that back. We are applying CSI to SRM even now, even before CSI is fully developed. So the bigger picture is we address all of these topics holistically in conversation through CSI. But that's both a digression into a particular strategy, OSS. But again, OSS is just an example of this pillar called strategy, right? Within the non-obvious, right? It's not obvious. It's not even obvious that we need a strategy. nor is it obvious what that strategy would be. So that's within the realm of the non-obvious. What's the strategy to accomplish everything within the obvious pyramid of whole world, people, and planet, right? So we need strategy. That's one pillar. We need a strategy. How are we going to get it done? A strategy and a corresponding plan, including a detailed implementation plan that starts us at this precise moment where we are right now. What do we need to do first, second, and third to go from here forward, right? So strategy and plan, and I would add to that story. So this is all within one pillar, this first pillar within what I'm calling the non-obvious. And that pillar I'm calling strategy, plan, and story. Okay. The next pillar, and so here's how you can kind of think about it. So we've got the obvious pyramid of whole world, people, and planet. And then what I'm essentially doing is going upstream and saying, okay, to get there, what do we need, right? Well, within the obvious, we know what the solutions are. And that point was made in that video, Codes for a Healthy Earth. We know what the solutions are, right? We've got so many solutions just on the shelf, waiting, ready to go. So it's not for lack of solutions. I would say, therefore, going upstream, what's holding us back? Strategy. We don't have a solid strategy for getting all this done. We've got a bunch of people with a bunch of ideas, some of whom are talking to each other, most of whom are not talking to each other, and we're stuck in the mud. So we need a strategy. That's the first within the realm of the non-obvious. And before I continue, I'm going to first pause in case anyone has any comments or questions. I can see I've already put Fred to sleep. That's not necessarily a bad sign, but anyway, go on mute.
When somebody sleeps on Zoom, can they be blacked out if they want, by another person, by you?
Oh, yeah, in fact, I'm going to, well, yeah, I guess I'll just turn his video off. I mean, actually, I think it's kind of cool being able to see Fred there. Well, and that way, yeah. Oh, okay. No, he's cool.
Okay. Hi, Fred. Sorry, I thought you were asleep there.
No, and Fred had an operation recently, so he's recovering. So he gets a kitchen pass.
I know, but I just thought if that ever happened to me and I fell asleep with the camera on, I would like it if the facilitator blacked me out, so that I wasn't there forever with my mouth open or whatever.
Totally. Well, I'll tell you what. So should that ever happen to you, I will definitely turn off your video for you, for sure. No problem. And I'm happy to provide that service to anyone. Just let me know. Okay, so back to the, and just jump in, everyone, if you have a comment or question or anything. So again, going upstream from what I'm calling the obvious of whole world, people, and planet. It's obvious what we need to do, right? Let's not kid ourselves anymore about that. But the question is how? How do we do it? That's not obvious. How do we start? People have been trying to start since Silent Spring, 1965, Rachel Carson, right? And of course, before that book in turn was a culmination of a bunch of, very preliminary pioneering work. That was all 55 years ago. So for over half a century, with Earth Days and, UN meetings from Rio to, to Denmark, Copenhagen, Paris. I mean, we've been at this for over half a century. And the situation is getting exponentially worse. So in this particular, movie of cops and robbers, the bad guys are winning. That's just the reality here, okay? So we obviously haven't hit upon the right strategy, or it would be implemented. So the first non-obvious thing that's missing is strategy. Now, if we go upstream from there, from strategy, well, what's it going to take to develop a strategy that's going to work? And also, we don't just need one right now. We also need one tomorrow, because between now and tomorrow, the world changes. And therefore, our strategy needs to be updated. Our plans need to be updated, including our plans of what we need to do for second and third. That all needs to be updated and refreshed. So we don't just need the capability right now. We just need that. We just need to wave that magic wand once, right? Find the right strategy and then we're done. No, I'm saying exactly the opposite. We need that as an ongoing capability, right? So if we go upstream then from strategy, what's the ongoing capability that we need in order to generate strategy and update and refresh and optimize strategy, right? I'm waiting for a delivery, so I need to check from time to time since I'm out on the back porch. But anyway, what we need in order to generate the right strategy at any moment in time and the right plan. And by the way, I'm going to put this in the following terms. To ongoingly generate and refresh the strategy and the plan on a daily basis and keep pushing forward and keep doing exactly what we need to do according to plan, right? That capability, the first thing I want to say about it is that capability is going to be it's awesome. I don't know if we can get there or not in time, but if we do, that will be an awesome capability. The capability to ongoingly generate the optimal strategy plan, including detailed implementation plan, taking us right to this moment. What do we need to do right now? Literally, right? So just imagine, let's just do a thought experiment, okay? I first started playing around with this thought experiment in 2011 and thought about writing a book about it. But the thought experiment is, what if there were like some alien intelligence out there that was just like, you know, like many orders of magnitude smarter than us, right? And let's just assume for the moment that it's a collective intelligence. So it's like a whole bunch of intelligent creatures. Like, remember that movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind that came out in like the mid-70s? And when the spaceship of aliens finally landed, thank you, Sal, there was just all these creatures. They looked like, naked little boys with giant heads, and thankfully without obvious sex organs. And, but it was just, but they were in this, they came out of this super sophisticated ship, right? And it's just like, how did these little creatures create this insanely sophisticated spaceship? The obvious answer is collective intelligence, because they looked to be in total harmony. That was another thing. Wasn't that a cool scene, that final scene when the human boards the spaceship with all those little aliens? You didn't see hierarchy. You didn't even see clothing or any kind of trinkets or tokens or anything. It's just like they were just naked, right? And they were all working together. They were all in total harmony, right? Anyway, suppose there is an alien intelligence out there that is so sophisticated, it's actually able to enter into communications like this one and even speak English with us. So imagine a new face appeared on the screen, right? And, it just had maybe maybe we actually had a video feed. So it was, let's say it was a room full of those aliens from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And here we are talking with them, and they're speaking with us in English. And they say, okay, here is what needs to be done. We have analyzed the situation thoroughly. You do need to do a press conference, but instead of New York, do it in San Francisco. And instead of Operation Stone Soup, call it this. You'll get the attention of millions of people, out of whom thousands will come forward. And that becomes your next leap forward into the thousands. And at that point, here is the focus. That will attract all these people and keep them engaged. And then you'll grow from thousands to tens of thousands, at which point the next inflection point is, and you can imagine these aliens basically telling us what the bleep to do, right? Are you guys with me, or is everyone as asleep as Fred?
Yeah, I'm with you, Jamin. It's another, you're saying in another way, we want the codes. That's what you're saying. We want the codes.
Yeah, go ahead.
You've just described it in a very graphic way, but what you need is that higher overview intelligence in order to you know, have a strategy. And we're down here and we're like the guides in Plato's cave. We're trying to work it out from a few little shadows, and it's hard. It is hard. We have to sort of get our consciousness onto a sort of higher level where we get an amazing overview, but we're stuck down here, you know, with old patterns, and you know, but that seems to be the word of the moment, finding the codes for change, the codes for this, the codes for that.
Yeah. No, good stuff. So thank you. You know, I'm, you know, codes could be interpreted in a number of different ways. And in fact, I think the way that Shelley is articulating it is basically, these are essentially like the new laws, right? That need to govern us, right? And I would actually submit that those laws are at this point obvious, right? And that's not to take away from her work in compiling them. Newton's laws in hindsight are obvious. But you know, still Newton deserves every ounce of credit for having compiled them. But beyond those laws, which I'm calling now obvious, you know, we've got the codes, they exist. It's not like we don't have them. We've got them. They're right there on that website, codes.earth. What I'm saying is missing is the strategy, the plan, and the story for getting us there, which is an evolving thing. Strategy will update every day. Plans will update every day. Even the story could be updated frequently, as frequently as it needs to happen. So what I'm saying is we need the capability for generating that. And I've described this alien intelligence as one scenario for that, is that, you know, so imagine the capability exists, and every day we wake up and we're downloaded with a whole new strategy or an updated strategy, plan, and immediate next steps. So it's just like this super brilliant guide for us, right? Now, since to my knowledge, we don't have that kind of communication with an alien intelligence, how can we create this essentially equivalent alien intelligence right here on Earth? And that's what collective superintelligence is about. And because collective superintelligence isn't the be-all, end-all of this amazing capability, it's a part of it. Other parts of it are more like the spiritual side, the collective consciousness, the collective spirit, and you know, other elements as well. I'm just putting all of those into a basket called, and this is borrowing from Dharmendra Gordon, who was on the first, who used to be on all the time, but haven't seen him for a few weeks. But anyway, he calls it accelerated collective evolution. So think of collective superintelligence as a subset of accelerated collective evolution, which includes the spiritual and the, you know, collective consciousness, and, you know, hive mind, you know, whatever, all the stuff, you know, that basically goes into this collective superintelligence. Anyway, I'm just calling it accelerated collective evolution, just to cast a big broad tent and be able to capture all that in one concept. So in review, we've got the obvious pyramid of whole world, people, planet. These are the solutions. These are the codes. This is, we know we need to make a shift to this new modality. We can imagine it. We can write about it. We can envision it. Charles Eisenstein wrote about it in his book, That More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. So what's missing? How do we get there? Well, we need a strategy, plan, story, etc. So that's that first pillar within the non-obvious, is strategy, plan, story. And then going upstream further is this capability to ongoingly generate that, which I'm calling accelerated collective evolution, which has the acronym ACE, ACE. So we need the ACE to ongoingly generate and refresh strategy, plan, and story, to then get us to the obvious, to tell us how to get to the obvious of a whole world taking care of people and planet. right? So now I've talked about the 3 pillars within the obvious and 2 of the pillars within the non-obvious, right? Strategy, plan, story is one of those pillars, and the other is ACE, accelerated collective evolution. Well, what's the 3rd pillar? If we take it then further upstream, how do we get all this started? How do we build? How do we create accelerated collective evolution and collective superintelligence that's a part of it? How do we create that capability here on Earth amongst us humans? And I have an answer to that. And that's the 3rd pillar, the 3rd and final pillar within the non-obvious. Does anyone want to take a guess at what I have in mind?
Lay it out for us, Kevin.
All right. The 3rd pillar, which is the furthest upstream, and again, just to put it into context, so we got 3 pillars within the non-obvious, and they're sequential. We have this final one that I'm going to unveil, which will generate the capability that we need, the accelerated collective evolution, including CSI, collective superintelligence, which will in turn constantly generate and refresh the strategy, the plan, and the story, which will then over time get us to the obvious, whole world, people, and planet. So this ultimate generator of collective superintelligence and accelerated collective evolution is none other than, drum roll.
Soup, stone soup.
Well,
Let's feed everyone.
Well, actually, Operation Stone Soup is within that pillar of the non-obvious called strategy, plan, and story, right? That is a hyper solution, a specific hyper solution, right? A hyper solution is a strategy, a plan, and a story to getting to the obvious of whole world, people, and planet, right? So for me, Operation Stone Soup is that first pillar within the non-obvious, strategy, plan, story. It's one example of what that could be, but I'm not saying that's the best possible one, because we don't yet have the collective superintelligence and the accelerated collective evolution to generate that and verify that that's it, right? We don't have it yet. We just have us. Now, we're off to a really great start, but we're small in number at the moment. But anyway, back to what I was going to say. What is that which will generate accelerated collective evolution and CSI and all those good things? And what I'm positing to you is that 3rd non-obvious pillar within the non-obvious pyramid. That 3rd pillar is precisely the conversation. Everything starts with the conversation. How do we do this? How do we save life on Earth? Right? And at this point, what has the conversation given us? Well, among other things, it's given us this present framework of the obvious pyramid and the non-obvious pyramid, right? And a vision for collective superintelligence, what it can evolve to become. And that's covered in the 30 minutes of video on RCI that's on the CI Block Party page on Radish. I trust everyone here has seen those 30 minutes of video. And if you haven't, please watch them. But it basically just lays out a relatively simple, I would say, framework for collective superintelligence. It's actually not that hard for us to go super intelligent. But again, just like with the codes for the healthy Earth and these obvious solutions within the obvious pyramid of whole world for people and planet, you know, as obvious as those are, just knowing them and knowing that they're obvious isn't cutting it. We need strategy, plan, and story to get there. That's the first non-obvious pillar. We need accelerated collective evolution with CSI to ongoingly generate and update that. And in order to generate ACE and CSI, we need the conversation. The conversation that points to them, a conversation that understands, that looks at it and explores it long enough to say, hey, that is what we need. We need CSI. We need ACE. And here's a path to getting there. So let's walk that path, right? Yes, Emery.
You know, Jamie, what I find frustrating is that, there's just so many conversations going on. I'm frustrated because, I want to be part of a lot of conversations that are happening now. As we're talking here and having this conversation, I'm sure there's a lot of conversations happening right at this very moment that I personally and some of us too, we're not being a part of it, right? So we're missing out on those conversations, which is unfortunate, but it's not like we have the time. It's not like I have the time to search out and visit the that conversation, if it's been logged somewhere, if it's been taxonomy somewhere, listed somewhere, do I have the ability to go and search all these conversations out and upgrade my thoughts? Because with each conversation that I am a part of, my thoughts get upgraded or downgraded to understand something. Like it's a vicious circle. I'm trying to catch my tail. The tail, not my tail, because I don't have a tail.
Thank you for that clarification, Emery. I'm really glad you articulated that, because I think we all feel that to different degrees. I have the same frustration. In fact, I was talking about this with Melissa the other day, that where I've gotten to is that because it takes so much of my energy just to host these conversations, the Solution Club and the Block Party, I really don't have bandwidth to go participating in others. I made an exception for Codes for a Healthy Earth because I know Shelley and Jan, and we've collaborated, and it's like, I need to do some of that outreach, especially to folks like that. But I really don't have time. So, but let me tell you my thought on it, and then so I see that you got your hand raised. So my thought is that it's not about how many conversations I can, be channeling and participating in and drawing from, or how many you can, Emery. It's not about any one of us participating in a huge number of conversations so that one of us can have the whole picture, right? The way I see it, and again, this is covered in the 30 minutes on collective intelligence, a video that's on the Block Party page on Radish. It's about a network of conversations in which a given individual only participates in a few, but there are millions of conversations in the network. And the network itself, the different conversations and the people, are connected and hyper-connected and hyper-linked in so many ways, and have such capabilities at their fingertips of doing essentially advanced search scenarios over the different conversations in the network, that it becomes tremendously facilitated for people to discover and join those conversations where they are most needed and where they most want to be, right, at the same time. So it's really a different paradigm, right? I was brought up in a family that values education very, very highly. And it's about, go out there and basically fill your head with as much knowledge and know-how as you can, and then you go out and market that, right? And in a world of hoarding and greed and capitalism and, neoliberalism and all that stuff, that's the paradigm. How much can I hoard or accumulate in terms of knowledge and know-how so that I can then go out and market it? In this new world, the whole world that we're seeking to co-create, it's a whole different paradigm. It's not about how much an individual can be plugged into, but it's about the network itself, right? How do we design the network so that the network is super intelligent as a network? Okay, so you got your hand raised, followed by Emery. Go for it, so.
Right, let's see a comment. Jamin, you're putting huge energy into this to keep it going. So that is marvelous. And I know it's really hard to do, you know, like to, well, maybe it's not hard for you, but to keep that energy at that high level, you know, when there's maybe only one person arriving and then it's quite dead for a while, you keep that energy going, and then suddenly there'll be a burst of energy in the little squares on our screen and that. So that's just a comment. But the other thing I want to mention is at the moment on Netflix, it's not a very deep program, but there's a program on there, documentary called The Creative Brain. And basically it's like this. It's like you have all these random things all together, and they've got to be together to create this creative soup where, you know, ideas can bounce and happen. And you've got to have situation, according to this program, where all these ideas can generate and all these creative thoughts and creative actions can begin. And you have to have a big forum in order to do that, for that to happen, which is the collective intelligence, presumably. You know, one person comes in, they trigger off an idea in somebody, and then they have a conversation with their mum about it, and then you're building the collective intelligence and pushing it to a high level.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, what we've envisioned is take the block party, say, you know, 3 months from now, where we'd like it to be. Instead of a few dozen showing up for a given block party, it's a few hundred and then a few thousand. And let's say it's a matter of thousands. So you can imagine thousands of people pouring in. You can imagine there being a sort of a reception function. So for first-time visitors who say, hey, I just heard about this, I don't know what's going on, you know, how does this work? There would be a process by which that person could be given a brief introduction, maybe a couple of hyperlinks, and they're able to then navigate to the conversation that they really want to be in. It's like if you walk into a giant skyscraper, you walk in the bottom floor, there's reception, right? There's a big like map, directory. Hi, can I help you? Right? Well, odds are you didn't walk into that giant skyscraper to talk with the doorman who's there to help you. You didn't come to spend 8 hours with that person. You came to find out, you know, how do I get to XYZ organization that's up on the 42nd floor, and they help you get there. So that's how I see the reception function. It's not where you go to stay, it's where you go to get to where you want to go. And you can imagine us having essentially a menu of different conference rooms that are open, a menu of different conversations that are happening. There could be this one, which is pretty advanced, and there could be some kind of beginner and intermediate ones where it's like, hey, let's get you up to speed on the basics of climate change and just how urgent all this is, and the different solutions that are obvious and the realm of the non-obvious. You know, you kind of work your way through that, and then, you know, eventually you end up in this conversation if this is the right one for you, right? Or you end up in a room with Dr. Yatow of Harvard working on SRM because you want to contribute there. Or you end up in some room about permaculture, or you end up in some room about codes for a healthy earth, right? But the point is, we can imagine the conversation evolving into this network of conversations, which is our vision. Anyway, I'm complete for now. I want to pass it off to Emery, who's got his hand raised, and let's just keep working on this till we figure it out. Go for it, Emery.
Yeah, it's quite a dilemma, because I understand and I see the whole network that exists. There is a network that exists right now, and I'm a part of it to some extent, just like everybody else. And we all have our pet problem, our prioritized sense of what is most urgent in our own minds, okay? And of course, we'll be drawn to a conversation that adheres to what those concerns are, right? But the work at hand really is to have some kind of a knowledge and understanding to how one proceeds after being part of a conversation, okay? And how do I contribute my understanding, the learned understandings as a consequence of having participated in a certain conversation, okay? I'm now upgraded, right? Let's try to look at that as an upgrade in an understanding. Now, I think the best scenario would be is that I, migrate my brain to some other conversation and share the contents with a new crew, right? To see whether I can develop the understanding based on what I've learned from the previous conversation. Okay, so it's an ongoing struggle to be at the right conversation at the right moment, and then be able to have use of abilities like possibly Superman, okay, to be able to, travel at the speed of sound to that next conversation and have an impact, okay, and or to drag along people with me who I would deem to be instruments, perfectly tuned instruments, to to elaborate in the conversation that I'm joining. You capisce?
Io capisco. Yes, I understand, Emery. No, I love the way you put that. Let me welcome our brother James, who just joined us from Ireland. Welcome back, James. Welcome back, Melissa. Welcome, everyone. I'll recap in a moment, but first let me answer Emery's question, which really gets to the heart of, for me, collective superintelligence, right? See, right now, it's like we're in this total fog, right? And the fog is characterized by not knowing which conversation to get into. And when you get into a given conversation that's new, you don't know who's there. I mean, you can see their faces, but you don't really know about them. And you don't know what they know and what they don't know. So you don't know when to start talking or when to listen or how to jump in or whatever. And so it's all very foggy and murky. And as a consequence, what we humans are doing is, not surprisingly, we're hanging out with our tribe, right? We're basically talking with people who, for the most part, share our fundamental worldview, et cetera, our culture, our tribe. So we hang out with our tribe, and the downside of that is we get a bit of an echo chamber effect as well as a confirmation bias effect. In this one great book on climate change by George Marshall, an Englishman, called Don't Even Think About It, Why Our Brains Are Wired to Ignore Climate Change, he recapped a meeting he had with a bunch of climate change deniers down in Texas, a bunch of Tea Partiers, and they had such an echo chamber going on inside there that they were just so convinced this whole thing is a hoax. It's ridiculous. right? And you can just imagine the conversation and how they feed on each other. A bunch of Texas Republicans, driving big SUVs. So that's what's coming out. That's what's resulting from the present fog, right? Is people are gravitating towards their own tribes and their own echo chambers. Now, here, I'd say this is a pretty advanced tribe, the one we're in right now, and congratulations for being here. Because this is one where we're not echoing around about, one dead end or another, but we're constantly seeking the bigger picture and asking the question, what's it going to take? But that's just us, we're doing our thing. But what you don't have is kind of an easy framework for navigating around and finding those conversations that you want. So imagine, here's just a random scenario. Imagine you come over to the United States from, somewhere in Europe by boat. You get here. You're trying to figure out your way. You understand there's some people and some relatives in Kansas City area, Missouri. So you get on a train or whatever in the mid-1800s, late 1800s. You get there, or maybe you start out in a wagon train. You get there. What do? You go door to door. You're knocking. You're asking questions. You're trying to find your place, right? And it's very inefficient. Now, contrast that scenario with what we have today with the internet and Google and Yelp and all that. Shoot, you could go right into Kansas City, start Yelping around, and within minutes or even seconds, you could find what you're looking for. So take those two paired scenarios, mid-1800s Kansas City versus 2020 with the internet. Now imagine another parallel paired scenario where you have the current fog, which for me is like the dusty, confusing mid-1800s Wild West. That present fog, now contrast that with a future state that doesn't exist right now, where we have programmatic, really smart, really efficient access to all these different conversations in the network that we can search for and find the right conversations very easily, right? That's what we need to get to. But right now, we're groping around in a fog. We're all like 99.999% blind. And yes, we're able to connect with people in our own family circles and tribe, but it's hard to get beyond that at present. Emery had his hand up, followed by Melissa. Go for it, Emery.
Yeah, I'm just going to revisit this conversation. I could imagine that I could be in a situation at home, okay, in my room, and I'm viewing a conversation, okay? Give you an example, okay? I'm interested in climate change, abrupt climate change, so I want to know more about it. I want to understand better everything about it. And so Guy McPherson is being interviewed by somebody. Well, those are two people having a conversation. Now, I'm by myself, remote. I'm on a remote location in my room, but I'm watching. So I'm becoming a part of that conversation. I can't actually reply or ask a question at the moment, but I, in my own mind, participate in that conversation. You understand? And we do this constantly, all the time. We are part of conversations all the time, all day long. Okay, well, I'll exaggerate if you allow me, but you know what I mean. So the work at hand is to bring that conversation that I participated in, okay, remotely into another reality for somebody else. Okay, I've already been part of that conversation, right? I want to bring that conversation along. I want to promote that conversation because in my mind, okay, I have an evaluated moment of understanding what's going on. So my best course of action is to share that with somebody that I would hope could lend some even greater enthusiasm to promote that understanding and discovery. So I'm bringing that conversation into play. I'm engaging by sharing it, by you know what I mean, by using it in a new participation in a bigger conversation somewhere else. And there has to be a lot more of that being done. Okay, we're coming together here. We're having our own conversation. But, and from time to time, we bring things to the table in the conversation, and we share certain things like a video or something, and we'll have a discussion about it after watching 5 minutes of it, right? And that is a great thing. That's a great tool to have, to be able to, on the spur of any given moment, bring in a conversation, a remote thing, a remote conversation. It already took place into a new one so that more people will have an understanding. I think that's the big job. That's what needs to be done.
Beautiful, beautiful. Totally agree. You could actually think of any human being as being sort of like an intersection between a whole bunch of different conversations, right? And every conversation that I'm in is part of Jamin's intersection, right? So if you go to Jamin's intersection, you'll see Solution Club, you'll see Block Party, you'll see conversations I'm having with Melissa, any other conversation, the one I did, Codes for a Healthy Earth. I was watching and I submitted some comments and questions, and imagine that all that data is available. So when Jamin shows up in a room, imagine there's like this whole word cloud above him, but instead of being a cloud of just words, there's also hyperlinks and this and that, recordings. It's like I bring all that with me. And if that information can be available to everyone in the meeting, and I can see, hey, Emery, okay, who's Emery? Okay, and then I see all the conversations that Emery's a part of, right? It's kind of like, if you want to know about a person, show me their friends, and then I'll have a view of who they are, right? And you've all probably heard the saying. In fact, we probably discussed it here, that you are who you associate with. You become who you associate with most closely, right? That's just how human beings operate. And so, with all that knowledge, so imagine now you show up to a meeting, bringing all that with you, right? And let's say you also bring with you what is top of mind for you and what you'd really like to be talking about, right? So for me, in my case, prior to every Solution Club and prior to every Block Party, I send out an email. Welcome, Melvin brother. How you doing? I send out an email and I say, this is what I'd like to talk about. This is what's top of mind for me, right? Imagine that everyone is able to bring with them an articulation of what's top of mind for them, right? Then we could do some really interesting things. We could group people according to what's top of mind for them, right? So you literally get to hang out with the people who you really want to be talking with, who are other people who are also basically saying, yeah, this is important. This is important. See, for me, top of mind right now is the conversation. what we're what we're calling the conversation. At other moments, top of mind for me is OSS. This morning, I went to a meeting on codes for a healthy Earth, led by Shelley. Melvin, were you there too? You're on mute, Melvin. I'm going to unmute. I'll let you unmute yourself. You're still on mute. Here, I'm going to unmute you. Okay, now you're unmuted.
I would have been there, even though I had stuff on my plate. I didn't know. That would have been awesome. Yeah.
Anyway, I know it's recorded. I imagine up on Humanity Rising you could watch the recording. But anyway, Emery's got his hand up, and oh no, Melissa, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Go for it, Melissa, followed by Emery.
Typical patriarchy.
Totally typical. In fact, the worst of the worst is what you're seeing out of Jamin Shively. Okay, go ahead, sweetheart.
I think we've become the tribe of the mask now, and I'm actually wearing my mask. I think a big issue is that we haven't been a tribe for a long time. We were these individuals operating from this sort of narcissistic lifestyle that we were told was the right way forward. And we've lost, if you think of native tribes, when they have an issue or a problem, they actually go to the elders. They go to the seniors who are the leaders. And I mean, given we're facing all these challenges on the planet, our planet is dying. I mean, it kind of seems obvious to me that the main topic of conversation for everybody at this point in time should be how to save the planet. And what I witnessed this morning, although I just saw 5 minutes of it, was still part of this old pattern of elitism and separation. And so how do we create something that's inclusive, that brings in people of color, poor people, indigenous tribes, women, elders? How do we make this something that is for all voices to be heard, and all of us coming together finding solutions? And that's why I like Block Party, because I think it's, Jamin, you've created a really safe space for people who otherwise wouldn't join into that conversation. And I'm not saying that Codes for a Healthy Earth, or whatever they're calling that, it's a good impulse. But how do we bring, people into that conversation rather than these panels, these elitist panels, and invite you to just witness rather than participating? Everybody fully participating. Where are the First Nations people? Where are they? Why aren't we hearing their voices? Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you. Yeah, no, really good points. I asked that question of Shelley in the comments. I said, this is my inspiration, that we need to create this network of conversations that's non-hierarchical, where everyone can bring their gifts. And thank you for the compliment about the Block Party. For me, that's totally where it's at. Everyone's included, everyone's welcome. And, over time, we're going to evolve it into a network of conversations. That for me that's the foundation for collective superintelligence. I'll recap what I was talking about earlier, since we've had a couple folks join in the last few minutes. But first, we got Emery, followed by So. Go for it, Emery.
Well, I kind of lost the context of what my remark, my additional comment was going to be. I kind of lost the context about it. But you were talking about knowing somebody by the kind of friends or associations that they might have, and I just wanted to respond in that particular department. I don't necessarily, in my world, I don't necessarily approve everybody's point of view, or or what their understanding may or may not be, you know, but they're under my purview, you know, like they're under my examination for the most part, you know. There are some that actually stand out, obviously, that are more obvious, and one can automatically see that there is a high approval of returns from my perspectives on any one connection that I may have. But it varies, you know. Not everybody is at the same level of approval in the book, but they're there to enable one to have a greater understanding, a better understanding, and maybe a different point of view that is also very enabling when it comes to making a decision as to what I'm going to accept as a good, reasonable understanding about something. So you need all sides of the picture, and therefore you need a lot of connections also. Now, I'm just putting that out there. Don't judge a book by, you know what.
Good, good, good. Thank you, Emery. Yeah, lots to pick apart here. So you got your hand up. Go for it.
We've got a TV show in UK. I don't know if you've got it in USA. It's called Gogglebox. And basically the show is this: you've got a bunch of ordinary people. Obviously, the people who set up the show, that they've selected these people for whatever reason, a variety or whatever. But they're ordinary people sitting in their homes, looking at various television programs and commenting on them. And now they've got a new program called Gogglebox Celebrity. Now, what's quite interesting is that the celebrities are nowhere near as interesting as the Gogglebox ordinary people. Obviously, the programs that we get are edited the half hour, however long it is, or the hour. I think it might be an hour. They've edited out the best bits, but I think that's interesting that ordinary people who they're not selling anything. The weird thing is, though, you know, like we're in this capitalist trap, and now they've become celebrities. These ordinary people who were selected for this program to just be their ordinary selves, of course, now they've become celebrities. So, you know, but anyway, I think it showed that ordinary people are pretty interesting, or they can be just as interesting. And this whole celebrity thing might be just because those people particularly wanted fame, or they particularly wanted a platform, or they particularly wanted recognition.
Yeah, you raised some really good points there. So, I mean, the fact that celebrities are not as interesting, it's because what they say is so predictable, right? It's so constrained by, you know, their persona, what they want to project, right? So, you know, like I might be a Hollywood actor, right? And, you know, maybe, you know, behind closed doors, maybe I don't give a hoot about animals, right? Oh, but on television, when I'm, you know, being interviewed, oh, animals, oh, I just cry every night for the animals and I just care. You know, it's predictable because they're constrained by the persona that they've built up. There are various contracts that they're bound by, promotion, advertising, whatever. So, you know, they're basically acting, even though they're supposedly not. They're always acting because they're celebrities and that's who they are. So, you know, whereas real people are real, you know, and what they say is not predictable, and that's what makes it exciting because it's not predictable, and you're getting kind of the real deal of what they're, you know, what they believe, what they think. And I think the world has kind of been lulled into a degree of collective stupidity at the present time, precisely because we're still drawn to the celebrity, right? So rather than participate in real conversations like this one, I think most people end up, tuning into Humanity Rising. Oh, there's Charles Eisenstein. And then they just listen to Charles Eisenstein for a couple of hours while their mouth is hanging open and they're going,
Well, they're passive, they're not participants. And that's the whole thing about someone's up there on a stage, you're the audience. Who wants to be a passive audience? Nobody wants that, do they really? You want to be part of it. You want to be part of the conversation. You want to be part of the play. Well, after I watched that little bid, and suddenly I was this celebrity on YouTube with about 27 people had watched it. And suddenly I wanted to, in the way of a celebrity, I suddenly wanted to edit everything I'd said because it was out there. And I thought, oh shit, what am I going to do? But what was I going to say? Yeah, that was a kind of strange feeling, really, that I'd said something kind of off the cuff, and the minute it was up there for everybody to see, I wanted to get my editing pencil out quickly.
Yeah, totally. And for me, this is all part of this transition that we need to make into a world where we are all participants in collective superintelligence. And there is this network of conversations, and we have real freedom of movement within that network because we have, essentially Yelp-like capabilities to find exactly those conversations that we want to participate in. It's like, if Melissa and I are out traveling and we want to find a restaurant wherever we are that meets our requirements, we'll Yelp and we'll type in our criteria, and we'll see a number of different options, and we'll scan through, and we'll be able to actually look at pictures and read other people's reviews and look at the menu. And so we really have an idea what we're getting into before we just show up there. We need a similar capability for the conversational domain. We essentially need a Yelp of conversations, right? So you can search for and find what you're looking for and essentially sample before you jump in. And I think that there is also some other kind of preliminary sort of work that we could, could be done and could be automated prior to a person jumping into a conversation, like that stuff that I was chatting about with Emery earlier, where each of us show up with our stuff, right? All the conversations that we're a part of and what's top of mind for us and all that. Imagine that was all programmatically pushed at the conversation, not interrupting the conversation, but all that data goes into the conversation database that, oh, Jamin just showed up and he's coming with all this stuff and this is what's top of mind for him. And it could be that a bot analyzes all that about Jamin and says, hey, Jamin, I appreciate you want to be here, but given what's top of mind for you and all the conversations you're in, it really doesn't look like a good fit. I think you might be frustrated here and kind of out of place, and you might end up interrupting a perfectly good conversation because you don't have the background for it. You're like, well, what's this all about? Like somebody shows up to a meeting and then they just start talking, even though they don't know what the heck's going on. And it's like, gee, I really wish this person would listen for a little bit first, find out what we're actually talking about before. That actually doesn't happen that often in this space, Solution Club or Block Party, in my experience. But what I'm saying is, part of what it will take to facilitate real freedom of movement within conversations is almost like a preliminary handshake, a data handshake between the person wanting in and the conversation itself, right? Imagine that a bot who's like a gatekeeper represents the conversation. You can imagine having a conversation with a bot before you even enter the conversation to see if it's a good fit and to see what you need to know before you jump in. Go for it, sweetheart, Melissa.
Don't you think that's awful controlling? Because, that's assuming that because someone apparently doesn't is not a contributor. That's very subjective, of course. And, you know, if I go back to First Nations powwows and doings and gatherings that I've been to, you know, that all people have the opportunity to speak, and they take you on a journey with them that you might not have anticipated going on, and can open you up to all kinds of new territories. Whereas if you're like prescribing this stuff like that, like, okay, I'm an artist, and you don't think that as an artist I might be a contributor to some conversation about, I don't know what, cyberspace. I don't know, but you don't know that. Nobody can know that, because an artist might be able to contribute, or somebody else, to the conversation and take it to a much deeper place. So I'm just questioning that. Thanks.
Totally, totally. I'd like to respond to what Melissa said, and Emery, I see you got your hand up there, buddy. So, as regards, so let me just give you an example of what I'm really talking about. And so a few years back, I interviewed an author who was a climate change denier, and he said, "Oh, I can prove it to you that climate change is, is a hoax, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And, we had a conversation. Okay. That's all interviewed and recorded. But I think his name is Ed Brodo, if I'm recalling correctly. So imagine Ed showed up here, right? And he said, "Great, you guys are talking about climate change. I'm here to tell you that it's a total hoax," right? Is there a single person in this room who would be interested in hearing Ed Brodo make a case that climate change is a hoax? Raise your hand if you would be interested in that conversation. I know I wouldn't. But that's me. You might. Okay, I don't see a lot of hands going up, and that's my point. He would not be a good fit in this conversation if he is top of mind for him and his intention is to debunk climate change, right? I'm simply not interested. I've gone through the exercise starting in the late 80s of analyzing, is climate, what is this climate change thing? Is it real? Is it false? Is it big? Is it small, et cetera? So for me, been there, done that. That ship has sailed in my mind, and I'm on to how do we deal with it, right? That's an example of what I'm saying. He would be a very destructive non-fit if he came in here guns a-blazing, bound and determined to debunk climate change, right? So that's one example I want to give. But the way that people would be filtered out would really be much more by their own choice than than being filtered out by a bot or anything like that. The only times a bot would filter somebody out is if someone is a certified interrupter and bully in conversation who doesn't play well with other people, and he's trying to get into a conversation that doesn't permit that kind of behavior, right? And there have been some real cases in the Solution Club and the Block Party where there are some people who simply can't come back right now, at least for the time being, because they didn't play well with other people, and they were in fact hurtful. So those are the only cases where someone would be excluded, right? But it brings up a really interesting topic, which is that of the context for a conversation. Like, if we all get together and agree that we're going to spend the next 2 hours talking about SRM, then we're going to talk about SRM. And someone who wants to talk about something else, this is simply the wrong meeting for them, right? And whether that gets sorted out between a conversation between them and a bot, or them coming into the meeting, interrupting the meeting for 5 minutes while we sort out that this is really not the right meeting for them to be in, I would rather that be dealt with between the bot and the interrupter, rather than the interrupter coming here and interrupting us and we have to deal with it. And then 5 minutes later, it's like, well, that was exhausting. What were we talking about? You see, it just totally breaks the momentum. So the bottom line is that there's a balance to be found between letting anyone barge in on any meeting they want and saying whatever the hell they want, and wait a second, what would you really like to be talking about? And let's help you find that meeting, all right? Okay, with that, Emery, you got your hand up, and I'll go on mute. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for clarifying your point of view on that. because I was looking at Melissa's point of view and really agreeing with a lot of what she said. You know, not to lose the context of what you were defining and explaining about how, you know, bots would determine perhaps who could come into a conversation by the baggage that you bring into the conversation being analyzed beforehand. So yeah, that's a complicated process right there, which, you know, on the level that you just explained it, Jamin, I think the bot would probably be able to deal with that kind of a thing. But then a lot of the you know, ins and outs of my history of where I've been is gonna be wide open book for the bot, which, you know, am I above board for that? I don't know. Do I care? I don't know. I might not care that much. I am where I am, and you know, as long as I could, you know, challenge any decision made at some point, that would be fair, you know. But just willy-nilly preventing, you know, someone from participation, that's a bit harsh, but it's understandable in some circumstances for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll all have to learn to get along. That's obvious.
Yeah, totally. Go for it, Melissa, please.
Thanks. Yeah, I want to second what Emery said. Like, it really helped you clarifying that. But I would say that that's also kind of obvious. Like, if it's somebody who's, you know, disrupting something, well, I mean, do you want them part of any conversation? You know, I was talking more about someone, like, say, within our group, where we're all here in a positive way. It doesn't necessarily mean we agree with each other on everything, but we're all here in a positive way to help find solutions to bring change. And that's more the group I was talking about, where I have a problem, or an issue rather, with this, again, this separating out, you know. But thanks for clarifying it, Jamin. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, you're welcome. Totally. Yeah, I mean, so just to give an example, everyone's here who's here in this meeting right now, I think should be here. You're a good fit. If you're here right now, it's because you should be here, you're welcome here, and you're a perfect fit. And in fact, it wouldn't be the same without you. What I'm talking about are people who don't fit that description, right? And, you know, how do we, you know, because for anyone who could be in here who would not be a good fit, I guarantee you there's a conversation where that person could go where they'd be a great fit. They would be happier, and the rest of the room would be happier that they're there, right? So it's really what we're really talking about is sort of like a Match.com of people and conversations, right? I don't want to marry the first. I'm monogamous with Melissa, so this is a very hypothetical question. But I wouldn't want to marry the first woman I go out on a blind date with, right? Maybe I don't like her. Maybe she doesn't like me. Maybe we drive each other crazy. Well, that's all very good to know so that we can not continue on together, right? Same with conversations and people. You're either a good fit or you're not. And, you know, how do we find that out? Anyway, that's a whole series of topics to discuss and to master, not one for us to try to figure out here. I think that's an area that's just rich with opportunity because of the fact that I don't think we have learned, I mean, because this whole Zoomosphere is so new to us as a species, and popping into meetings where you don't know anyone there, and suddenly starting to talk with everyone there, That's really new in our experience, right? As human beings, this is all very, very new. All I'm saying is we need a framework for it that's conducive for people finding the right conversation for them, participating, contributing in positive ways, being contributed to in positive ways. It's a Match.com, it's a Yelp, it's a Google Advanced Search. It's all those things applied to this new, very complex, very massively multidimensional conversational domain that's just emerging now and has been emerging in the last, 3 months, really. Emery, you got your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, so like as you were defining the pillars, right? I mean, this is the ultimate pillar, right? Isn't it? The conversation was the final achievement that you were talking about, no? So in fact, this is perfect conversation about the conversation that's envisioned, right? So we want to make the pillar strong enough to to maintain a certain momentum towards success, right? So the conversation we want it to be successful. So, these are all components of the conversation that needs our consideration. So we're talking about it and having the conversation about it, which is all, it all fits in, I think.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, I'm actually working on a slide that I want to show to everyone that puts in visual form what we've been talking about, but I'll chip away at that and it won't take me too long, but anyway, because, well, here, let me just get it done and then I'll show you all. Almost there. And feel free to share away, anyone, in the meantime, while I get myself sorted out here. Okay, I got it. All right. So let me screen share here. Okay, so first let's start with what I was talking about the obvious, right? Whole world, where we want to get to, what that world looks like. what it means for people, what it means for planet. I'm calling that all that obvious at this point. We've analyzed it. We know what we need. It's just a matter of how do we get there. Which brings us to the realm of the non-obvious. Okay, so here's the slide I was putting together. So the obvious is here in the lower right? Whole world, people, and planet. Whole world for people and planet. Here, let me talk to the crow for a second. Hey, Tikwa. 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 Hey, Tikwa. Hey, Tikwa. Tikwa. Hey, Tikwa. Hey, Tikwa. You know that mommy puts those out for the other critters. We put fruit out for you over there. Anyway, sorry, just trying to have a very peaceful conversation with the crows. Okay, so the obvious is here in the lower right? To get to the obvious, we need a strategy and a plan, right? To be able to develop strategy and plan, we go upstream and we need collective superintelligence, accelerated collective evolution. I'm just putting ACE/CSI for all that. And in order to generate that, we need to have the conversation, which is what we're having right now. We're talking about, hey, what could and would this look like? How would it need to function in order to be efficient? See, we're basically saying, how do we get out of the fog, right? See, right now we're deep in a fog. And in fact, I'm going to add to this slide. I'm going to show like a picture of fog and then a line through it saying, hey, instead of fog, let's have CSI, right? And that gets directly to what we've been talking about. What features, what scenarios do we need so that we can have a properly functioning conversational domain rather than the fog and confusion and then everyone basically saying, screw it, I'm just going to go back to where I know is safe, which is my tribe, right? And what that's defaulting to now is that most people are watching these celebrities like Charles Eisenstein and their mouth is hanging open and they're watching and learning, right? Just like we've been doing for the last 50 years, right? If nothing changes, nothing changes. We need to evolve from this, celebrity fixation. We need to evolve way past that to a place of actual conversation and a network of actual conversations, which is the original vision of Snack Bar, a social network of actual conversations where we're all talking with each other across a vast network. Yes, sweetheart, go ahead, Melissa.
I just want to add to what you're saying. We need to evolve to a place of understanding and acknowledging the gifts that we've been given in a lifetime and to assume the power to live those gifts out loud in the world in service of a greater good.
Beautiful, beautiful. And we need a conversational domain that supports that. And in fact, just listening to what you just said, Melissa, I'm thinking of a hypothetical analogy where I'm 5 years old, right? It's whatever, 1973, I'm 5 years old. And let's say that I'm put into some public school in some inner city somewhere where it's just really violent, really dysfunctional. There's bullying everywhere. The teachers and staff don't give a crap. They're just there to punch the clock, get their money and leave. And it's just a terrible environment for me. So I'm depressed, I'm shut down, I'm not learning, I'm not creative, I'm just trying to not get beat up, right? And I'm just miserable. And I go home and just watch cartoons just to escape reality instead of doing my homework or learning how to read or something constructive like that. So now take that situation and then say, okay, what if, Jamin's parents realize what's going on, they take him out of that bad school and put him into like a Waldorf school where everything is love and compassion and there's no violence. It's just not tolerated. And, and then I just thrive, right? So that's where, so humanity right now, it's kind of like humanity is in that bad, violent inner city school and we're just getting our butts whooped and we're not learning, we're not being creative, we're not developing our gifts. We're not doing anything with our gifts other than hiding them away out of fear, right? Now imagine that we're able to take poor humanity out of that violent inner city school and put it into essentially a Waldorf school for humanity. That's really what we're talking about here. This new conversational domain is like a Waldorf school, but for all humans. Imagine just a gigantic Waldorf school that's the size of a planet. And you go there and it's just like there's no violence. It's simply not tolerated in any form. Whether, wait, I just need to check something here. Again, I'm waiting for this important delivery. As soon as I want to hear a noise, you know, because you know what they do. Like they'll just, anyway. Okay. False alarm. Okay. So that's what we're creating here. It's a Waldorf, like a Waldorf school for humanity. A framework, an infrastructure, a culture, a set of rules that works, right? Again, out of the fog into the light. That's what we need right now. We need badly, urgently, this conversational domain that we've been envisioning for quite a while. We need to do it. But just like with the whole upstream thing here, I'll share it again just to use as a backdrop for what I'm saying. Basically, in the last 50 years, we've been working here in the lower right image. Whole world, people and planet. Okay, what does the world need? The world needs this. The world needs that. And we're essentially in violent agreement about all this, which is obvious. We need this, we need that, we need, and Codes for a Healthy Earth just essentially summarizes all that and says, in a nutshell, here's what we need. Well, again, 55 years of us knowing what we need and knowing better and better and better, that's not cutting it. It's not getting us there. So it's like, well, what else do we need? So then we go upstream. Well, what we need is a strategy and a plan to make all this happen. Okay. Where's the strategy? Where's the plan? Well, go upstream again. What do we need to generate that strategy and plan? Well, we need collective superintelligence, accelerated collective evolution. Okay. And what do we need in order to have that? Well, we need to have a conversation about that, and about what we're going to do with that, and about what we're going to do with that, if I haven't lost you, right? In other words, we need to have, the conversation is really a conversation about this whole stack, right? It's a conversation about everything that's on the screen right now as a whole, right? And maybe it starts here, but really what needs, see this, what you're seeing on the screen here needs to be the beginning of a network of conversations, because there's so many facets to each of these. Here, let me just go show where we go with the whole world thing. People and planet, okay, got it. And then from there, we break it down into detailed needs of people and planet. And we can, you know, carry it further and further from there. And anyway, it's just, so that just blows up into this whole taxonomy, right? Well, the same is true of strategy, of plan, of CSI. CSI itself has multiple components. The conversation itself has multiple components. So there's complexity all throughout. And the way to handle that complexity is to divide and conquer by humanity, dividing ourselves into the appropriate conversations. The whole network of conversations spanning all of these topics. Okay, Emery, you got your hand up. Go for it, Emery.
Yeah, that's what I was going to point out, was that along that chain there, along that progression to the conversation all along the road, okay, everybody's at a different point, at a different level of engagement in the process, right? So, you know, part of the work to be done is to integrate those along that road together, you know, to motivate and to, you know, just to help get the work done, You know, I mean, everybody's kind of working on a little piece. You know, they think, well, you know, I think I have the plan. I think I got a pretty good blueprint here in my, you know, under my tools here, in my dossier. You know, I put it all together, right? So, you know, all along that road, there are so many thousands and millions of people who are, you know, they're achieving, they're achieving, and they're feeding the conversation. You know, they are for sure, but you know, do we have the means to integrate it all? You know, we want to have the ability to integrate it all together. I think is the ultimate goal of you know, after viewing the process, right? We were looking for results, you know, so we're gonna have to pull it all together.
Exactly. And you know, that's exactly what our vision for CSI, for collective superintelligence, is based on, is the urgent need to pull it all together. You said it very well, Emery. Everyone, all of us, each of us has been focused on whatever we're able to focus on, right? Our own little part of the world, right? Some of us become experts in this or that. Some of us become practitioners in this or that. Some of us become students of this or that, whatever. You know, so each of us has some interesting cross-section slice of reality that we're familiar with, but most of reality we're totally unfamiliar with as individuals. So, you know, the question is, for us, is really very similar to the question for the Toyota production system. I want to build a car that's got 15,000 parts. I know what the parts are. I've got the plans. How do I put it all together? So they created a Toyota production system to put all the parts together and do it very efficiently. We need to create the equivalent of the Toyota production system for the conversational domain. Because right now it is one chaotic, gigantic warehouse with gazillions of parts. Nobody knows what goes where in what sequence, right? Each of us has an idea about, you know, our own part of it. And most of us are quite passionate about our own part of it, right? So like the steering wheel guy there in this massive, hypothetical, chaotic Toyota warehouse. As far as he's concerned, Jackie, as far as he's concerned, he's got it. He's got the steering wheel. And if I could just get the darn steering wheel connected, then we could steer this vehicle, right? So listen to me, everybody. I've got the steering wheel. Everybody listen to me. I've got the plan. I know where it needs to be connected. So everybody just shut up. Just shut up and listen to me. Okay, except for Melissa. Okay, go ahead, sweetheart. And welcome, Jackie. Great to see you, Jackie.
Okay, but the difference is in the car factory, all the workers are working towards the same goal. So it doesn't really matter if one guy's doing the steering wheel and the other guy's doing the brakes. They all have the same but, the same goal, the same target, the same path. This, you know, they're heading in the same direction. The problem with a lot of us is people are all mixed up, right? Some people just want to focus on the virus and getting better and getting back to work again. Others know what's happening to the planet and want to, you know, focus on that. So it's how do you get all the factory workers to work on the same car?
Yep.
Over and out.
Okay, good, Melissa. Thank you. Yeah, so it's a giant coordination and integration problem, right? How do we coordinate? How do we coordinate with each other? How do we find out who's working on what? You know, where is the big blueprint that we can all map to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All righty, Emery, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, for the most part, so many of us are in our own world. You know, we're at the car plant fitting that steering wheel, or you know, or working out some kind of a low beat, right, with some musical program that's available. You know, like that's a whole world in its own. You know, all these levels of things that people occupy their time with, right? You know, I'm guilty as charged too, because you know, just the other day I was trying to understand how these programs work. You know, the VST. I mean, there's a whole language. There's a whole language created on a lot of these different things that you could get yourself involved in. And being interested in music, you know, it's a challenging thing for me, but it interests me, so I'm devoting some time towards it. So, you know, it's the same for many people. You know, they become entwined in their own world, you know, and not to say that you don't have more than one planet or more than one world. You know, we all have different interests and devote enough time towards many different aspects of our interests. So this is all a good thing, but we got to still bring it all together somehow, right? We still have to find ways to pique somebody's interest and prioritize some of these issues. Some of these pressing issues need to be prioritized and brought to the attention of Joe, you know, who's got the wheel in his hand. Okay, I mean, you know, it'll work for the car, but there's other things too that need direction. You know, so you know, we got to bring Joe into the picture somehow.
Yeah, and I just want to add to what you're saying, Emery. I think, you know, the biggest problem is we're like spoiled children. For 300 years, we've been able and permitted to run amok. And now we're being told, uh-oh, we can't do that anymore. Can't go to our favorite candy store. Can't go to the movies. And, you know, humans don't like that, right? So it's kind of like we have to focus on what's really imperative and important and get out of the candy store, the illusion, you know, thinking that things are going to be normal, things are going to be like they were before, that we can just carry on doing whatever the F we want to do, right? But we cannot. And so it's not just about, you know, any longer individual choices or individual freedoms. It's like, well, what really matters? And what are we really trying to save here? And, you know, Jamin's question, how, you know, what's the elephant in the room and how are we going to address that? And not just keep, you know, getting distracted by these other things that take our fancy. Thank you.
Thank you, sweetheart. Great conversation. All right, James has his hand up. And I'm going to give a recap, which is kind of overdue. That'll help for some of the newcomers. But go for it, James.
Yeah, thanks, Jamin. Sorry, though. Yeah, I think we're kind of getting slightly distracted ourselves, and because, like, looking at the graph you showed there a while ago, and it seems like that I get where Emily's coming from and Melissa, but at the same time, like as you explained with the car factory, they all have their different jobs, and the car gets built, but the car wouldn't have got built without the plans being put into place and you know, all the infrastructure put into place, and none of that would have been put into place if the conversation didn't take place in the first place to start to figure out the plan, which is what we're on about here. Is we have to have the conversations in order to figure out the plans and figure out what's necessary and how we get to where we're going. So I get where the other, where Emily and Melissa come from. But the thing is, what we're forgetting is there is only about one, as we know ourselves, the percentages are that there's only about 1% of the planet know what's really going on with the situation, with the climate and everything else. So that is our key focus. That's the people who we're supposed to be focusing on. So, all right, yeah, the rest of the world is distracted. Yeah, they have a blindfold over their eyes. It's going to be, it'll be harder to try and convince them about what we're doing and to get on board with it than it would to actually solve the whole problem we're dealing with in the first place. As far as I'm concerned, we have to focus on getting as many of the 1% in this conversation. So our priority for this conversation should be, how do we focus on getting as many voices in here out of those 1% into this conversation in order for the conversation to progress the plans and so on and so forth.
Thank you, James. And just to clarify, in case there's ambiguity, the 1% who James is referring to is not the 1% wealthiest, but the 1% most awake, most dialed in, basically well represented by the people who are here in this meeting. All right, go for it, Emery, and then followed by Jamin. Jamin's going to give a recap, including a couple of visuals, just to kind of clarify for folks who just jumped in. Go for it, Emery.
Good. Just a quick question to you, Jamin, and then I'll gotta respond. Tell me about the elephants. Tell me about the elephants. 2 in the front, 2 in the back. Could you explain that to me? And then I got a little comeback on that.
All right. So this is a joke my dad used to tell in the appropriate situation. He'd say, how do you get 4 elephants into a Volkswagen Bug? The answer, put 2 in the front seat, 2 in the back seat. So go for the simple. All right, Emery, back to you.
Yeah, and my response is when you start doing things like putting 2 elephants in the front seat and 2 in the back, you gotta make sure you check the tire pressure. You know, tire pressure is very important. So whatever that could mean to you, I thought it was would be fun to say that.
All right, point taken. And what I used my dad's joke as a backdrop for is a similar kind of joke that I made about how do you get the world to go vegan? The answer, feed them plant-based foods. And then here's a third one that just occurred to me since you raised it, Emery. How do you get collective superintelligence to happen? Answer, have the conversation that we're having right now. All right, and with that, I'm going to screen share. What the heck are we talking about here? All right. So let me start with this slide on whole world. And I'm simply making the point that we actually have what is the world we want in the future? I think that we've reached a point where we pretty much know the world that we want. We know what we don't want, and we know what we do want. So let's, as Jackie says and Myra says, let's embrace the knowing. We're in the age of knowing. Let's stop pretending that we don't know, and so on. Okay, so what does our world need to be whole? Well, we need wholeness for people and wholeness for the rest of the planet, right? Being people ourselves, we kind of break it out in these terms. It's also partly because of the oxygen mask thing on the airplane. You first put on your own mask and then take care of the masks around you. In our case, it's not really coming out of a selfish place. It's that humanity, unbridled, unconstrained, has done and is doing some pretty terrible stuff out there in the world, and we need a new paradigm. So Okay, so now from there, let me move up in the slides. And this next slide simply shows that, you can break it down. And this is just the beginning of a taxonomy. So it can be broken down to the nth degree, et cetera, et cetera. But rolling it back up, what I'm suggesting now is that we know what we know what the world of the future looks like. We know what we want. We know what people need. Yeah, we can list it all out or not, but let's just for the moment say, look, we know what people need to be well. They need food, water, community, love, family, et cetera, et cetera. For the planet, what does the planet need? Well, we know that too. We know we need, clean air, a cool planet, healthy water, healthy land and soil, healthy ecosystems. So we know all this. So I'm saying all of this, whole world for people and planet, I'm calling this the realm of the obvious. We know what we want, and our knowing has, essentially increased over time. But it's not like in the 60s we were clueless either. So we've actually known for a pretty long time. So what's missing? If we know what we want, what's missing? What's missing is, and so think of this as like a river that starts up here on the upper left and goes to the lower right. In fact, I should do this as a series of slides. I'll make that happen for the next version. But anyway, so if what we want is obvious, what's missing? A strategy and a plan to get there. What do we need to do first, second, and third? And Operation Stone Soup is an example, right? But I don't want to confuse it with the concept of strategy and plan. Strategy and plan is a general concept, and there's lots of different candidate strategies and plans. OSS is simply one of those. It's one possible strategy and plan, but it's not the only one. Okay? And then we say, okay, well, great. So we need the best possible strategy and plan to be able to go forward and get this world that's now so obvious. How do we get there? Well, we need a strategy and plan. That's clear. How do we get a strategy and plan? The answer, collective superintelligence. And as Dharmendra says, accelerated collective evolution, right? So I'm just kind of lumping those two together. We basically we need to evolve to a place where we're way smarter than we are now. Collectively, collective superintelligence, because collectively we'll be able to put together the strategy and plan to get us there. All right, how do we get to a place where we have collective superintelligence? Well, it all starts right here, the conversation, where we talk about all this and where we need to get to. And it simply all starts with a conversation. How else is it going to start, right? What are we waiting for, like some stone tablets to appear somewhere and tell us exactly what we need to do? Right. All right, with that, I'm going to go on mute, see if there's any questions or comments.
I had one for CSI.
Yeah, go ahead, Emery.
Just came to mind for CSI. I mean, collective superintelligence for sure, but just I don't know, for some reason I got Guy came to my mind. He would say clever, very clever. So clever social integration, we could be very clever. We have to find a way to socially integrate to a point where, people will start to want that conversation and that, that whole world view, We're going to have to be very clever, super clever. Just saying.
Very good, Emery. Thank you. Yeah, we need to be not just clever, but wise and all those good things. That's why I put I don't just put CSI, put ACE, Accelerated Collective Evolution, where we're evolving emotionally, spiritually, we're just evolving, right? Beyond what we learn doesn't work, and to discern what does work and what is good. All right, so you got your hand up, go for it.
It's quite interesting what you said, Jamin, about what are we waiting for? Some kind of stone tablet with Moses coming down from the mountain. The thing is, if you look historically, that kind of signs and wonders thing has historically been the very thing that has budged people. You know, snakes, burning bushes, come on you lot, leave Egypt, all that kind of thing throughout. You know, how did the guy who started the Mormons actually get people to travel all the way down to an inhospitable country? I mean, there must have been some kind of like sign and wonder to get them to budge, because people like their home comforts, they like their home comforts then as they like them now. So it's quite interesting that, what do they need? A stone tablet? You know, so you know, Moses, you could say that's a model of leadership, and then the stone tablet is the plan. But it's also the signs and wonders. This came from another being, you know, and all this kind of thing. It's really, that's part of the mythical element. I remember when I was studying religion as a, you know, studying it as comparative religion. There was this book we read called by a guy called Ninian Smart, and he isolated the 6 dimensions of religion, and there was the mythical aspect, the experiential, the ethical, the ritual, the doctrinal, and the social. And I remember when I got interested in businesses and setting up a business, I pretty much used that model exactly the same way, but for a business. I mean, a lot of that kind of religious language is there in the world of business anyway, isn't it? With mission statements and all the rest of it. So, in a way, that what are we waiting for? We are actually, most people are waiting for signs and wonders. I mean, how the hell did that Mormon guy, what was his name, Joseph Smith? How the hell did he get all those people in their cozy little worlds to trek so far and to set up in the middle of a desert? How the hell did that happen? I mean, we're looking for that magic ingredient, aren't we?
Yeah, really, really good question. So I know a little bit about that, not a ton. But I think a big part of it is that people were actually not so comfortable in their comfy little world, right? And it was really the downtrodden, the people at, you know, the bottom of the pyramid who had the least to lose by giving up what they had not, right? And going off in search of something new where they could at least be part of something, where they were welcomed and honored, right? And it's like, hey, I can be a part of this thing, a welcome, honored part, you know, respected, loved, etc. Or I can just be one of the downtrodden, you know, getting constantly trampled on by those above me in this old hierarchical world. And of course, what's fascinating is they all went to Utah and a new hierarchy formed. But anyway, that's not what they were promised. But anyway, these are really interesting historical comparisons for what we need to do, because we are creating a whole new movement, right?
And the key is the word movement. That's what, you know, it's about moving, getting people to budge. I've brought this up before about Extinction Rebellion and what they pulled off with occupying those 5 bridges in central London. That was a hell of a thing to pull off. It was a hell of a thing. But they put loads and loads of work into it. They went round, as I said, they went round to these, they advertised these tiny little church halls or groups or environmental groups all around the country, farmers groups. They went there, they gave their message. They said, are you up for it? They got them to sign. you know, they had no idea whether it was going to come off, but a lot of energy went into that to bring about that massive bridge occupation in a central, in a big city of the world, you know. And but it's good, it's quite good to learn from those things, isn't it? Where did that energy come from? I mean, you've got a lot of energy, Jamin. You've got a big energy, like 5 bridges, you know, probably 100 bridges type energy. But how do you get people to budge? How do you get the movement, the literal movement?
Yeah, you know, I think part of the answer can be found in the question that you posed, because, like, take Extinction Rebellion, right? They got a whole movement started and a lot of people piled on because it was addressing something urgent, and there was really nothing there that was giving all these people an outlet. So they all filed into Extinction Rebellion, only to find that it's not all that it's cracked up to be, because the answer that they're offering to this problem is a relatively rigid answer. It's basically saying, okay, the world's problems need to be solved not by us, not by the people, but by the governments. You need to solve it. But you need to solve it in the way that we're telling you you need to solve it, right? So for me, Extinction Rebellion, their platform is a non-starter, but they were able to get a whole bunch of people together and the attention of the whole world. What if we...
And that is what's interesting, though, isn't it? That, you know, even if those people who were budged to move and they hadn't moved before, or they hadn't felt there was anything they could buy into that would, you know, and they didn't just move, they put their lives at risk. They said these are sort of very plain ordinary people who were willing to get arrested, you know, probably very law-abiding people. It's that movement I'm interested in. Whether they stayed or not is a different thing. Oh yes, of course, as with all these things, they all started quarrelling and that afterwards. But presumably even those Joseph Smith people, you know, like the group that actually set off, there's probably about 20% that arrived in Utah. Because that's the way of people, isn't it? You know, I don't agree with that one. And, you know, we've even got it in the Old Testament with Moses. They were all squabbling and they were fighting about this and fighting about that, you know, and then they have to have this leadership. But no, even if it's not a big answer, it's that just getting people to move is just a massive, I think that's a massive thing in the first place.
Yeah, and I see a huge opportunity for us to partner with Extinction Rebellion and say, hey, you know, you guys have done such a great job getting the world's attention, getting people together. We have something that we think we can offer to you, which is, you know, at its heart, it's this conversation and collective superintelligence, but taking a much more open stance as opposed to a rigid, closed stance that this is the solution, right? You know, say, what do you think, right? Because they're kind of stuck in the mud right now because of, you know, the virus and all that. They can't really go out and glue themselves to bridges like they used to. Among other things, not that many people are crossing those bridges anymore. So, you know, they've kind of stalled out. I think we can help them and help ourselves by teaming up. All right, it's almost the top of the hour. We've been at it for 3 hours, and I actually had to get up early this morning, partly to see Codes of a Healthy Earth, and then had an appointment to go to. So I'm a little bit tired. I could actually use a break, but not everyone is. I'm sure, you know, Jackie, you just got here, so you're probably like raring to go. So if you all want to continue, that's great. While I take a little, maybe like a 20-minute nap or something like that, or we can all just take a break. I mean, how do people feel? I'm going to pause for the moment while we figure out logistics.